Hey everyone, I'm Jesse Vivek, and I'm going to tell you what you need to know about Theodore Roosevelt to do well on the U.S. History Regents. He comes up all the time, and there's just a couple questions that if you know the topics and you know a little bit about history, you'll be fine for. So the first notion, or the first idea, is Theodore Roosevelt as a trust buster. You also see questions about Roosevelt and his foreign policy, the Roosevelt Corollary. You also will see stuff about his conservationism. And last, you occasionally see things about the Russo-Japanese War. So I'm going to quickly talk about each one, and in about 10 minutes, you too will be a Theodore Roosevelt expert. I want to start with something that I think is really interesting about Roosevelt. He's the only president in the history of the United States to have won both the Nobel Peace Prize and the Congressional Medal of Honor. So the Nobel Peace Prize is given for people who create peace, and the Medal of Honor is given for people who exhibit amazing amounts of bravery and put their lives aside to help others in combat. So Teddy Roosevelt was both a warrior. He got the Medal of Honor for his bravery at San Juan Hill, and he was also a peacemaker, and he made peace between the nations of Japan and Russia after the Russo-Japanese War. And you might actually see a question about the Treaty of Portsmouth, September 5th, 1905, which is Teddy Roosevelt making peace between those two countries. And you also might see a political cartoon or a question about San Juan Hill, which was 1898, and that's actually before Teddy Roosevelt was president. So, interesting stuff about Teddy Roosevelt. So let's talk about trust busting. Trust busting is all about monopolies or trusts, and you can remember what that means by the game of Monopoly. And in the game of Monopoly, the goal is to own everything, and that's exactly what a monopoly is. So if you had like a video game monopoly today, that would mean that the company owns all the developers who develop the video game. It means that they own the distributors of the game, and maybe even the hardware companies that make the video game machines that you play the video games on. So if that was actually the case today, that monopoly could say, instead of paying $50 for an Xbox game, you're going to pay $100 for an Xbox game, and that would stink because video games are really fun. But you wouldn't have a choice. You couldn't go to Best Buy or Amazon or GameStop to get your game because there was only be one company that could make the game. So that's actually how things were when Teddy Roosevelt was president for a lot of different industries, particularly the steel industry and the oil industry. And these were industries run by one person, one company, called a monopoly or a trust, and they did a lot of things that were very unfair, like raising the price in a way that no one could compete with. So they controlled competition. They were the only company out there. They were the only place to get the video game, the only place to get the steel. So Teddy Roosevelt didn't like that. He thought that it was unfair, and so he went around breaking up unfair trusts. He used Congress's power to regulate commerce, interstate commerce, to do that. And if you look in the cartoon, you'll see he's putting a clamp on the rich industrialist, and the money is coming out, and he's sort of trying to combat this trend of the rich getting much, much richer and the poor getting poorer by breaking up the trusts. So you will see a question, or you may see a question about Teddy Roosevelt busting up trusts, getting rid of these unfair business practices. And for that reason, he's known as a progressive president. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt actually ran for president a third time. Most presidents don't do that. They stop after two because of the precedent set by George Washington. But he ran for a third time in the Bull Moose Party. He made a third party. It's the most successful third party in history. Usually it's just Republican, Democrat, Federalist, Anti-Federalist, Whig, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, I guess. But at this time, Teddy Roosevelt started his own party called the Bull Moose Party, and they were all about progressive politics. They were all about getting rid of the unfair business practices and some of the other things I'm going to talk about from Teddy Roosevelt's presidency. So Bull Moose Party also comes up. So you may remember from earlier this year that at the beginning, American foreign policy was sort of directed by George Washington's farewell address in 1792. He said, "We need to stay away from Europe. Nothing good can come from any type of foreign policy outside of our own borders. We're just not strong enough. We need to be neutral." And After that, in 1823, President Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine, which was kind of a building on the George Washington's neutrality. And Monroe said, we shouldn't go to Europe, but they shouldn't come to us either. And he said that people in Europe need to stay away from the Western Hemisphere, and the Western Hemisphere is like America's territory. We're going to control that. We're going to police that. That's going to, well, not really police. We're just going to keep Europe out of our half of the world. Teddy Roosevelt added to this with his notion of the big stick. And you see in this cartoon, Teddy Roosevelt is carrying a big stick, and it is what it sounds like. It's the military. It is using our big stick to get people to do what we want. And that's what the Roosevelt Corollary of 1904 was all about. He was saying that not only is the Monroe Doctrine still true, not only should Europe stay away from the Western Hemisphere, but now we're actually going to use our military to get what we want in the Western Hemisphere. And a lot of people said that this was imperialism. This is extending our country's power through diplomacy and the military and our economic might. And some people were opposed to that, and some people thought it was a great thing. It sort of was a byproduct of industrialization at this time. But the famous line and a quote that you might actually see on the Regents is this idea that Teddy wrote, where he said, "Speak softly," Theodore Roosevelt said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick, and you will go far." And that was him saying, we're going to use our military in the Western Hemisphere to make sure that our interests are maintained. And the best example of this, of course, is the Panama Canal. So let's look at some geography real quick. We're going to look at a little map of the United States. So here's New York. Here's New York City, right where my mouse is. That's where I live. That's where the I school is, my school. If you head south, though, you get to South America. And in between South America and North America, there's this lovely country called Panama. Here it's lovely. I've never been there. But let's take a look at what actually happened in Panama. So this is a map now, zoomed in, of Panama. So the Panama Canal was a project that Teddy Roosevelt, that sort of epitomizes Teddy Roosevelt's belief in the big stick. And he used our military, he used the United States economic power to basically say, Panama, we're building a canal, we're going to dig a trench from one shore in the Atlantic Ocean to your other shore in the Pacific Ocean, and by digging that trench with buckets, with shovels, the water is going to come in and fill it, and then we'll be able to actually drive ships through the Panama Canal. So why is that important? Let's go back to the big map for a second. Why would we want to have ships go through the Panama Canal? Well, here's a map of the world, and in the past, a ship leaving New York to California would have to go all the way south through the Atlantic Ocean, round the bottom of South America, and come back up to California. If a ship wanted to go from Europe to Japan, they would have to go all the way around South America and hit Japan, or maybe they would go around Africa. With the Panama Canal, now that there's a waterway between North and South America, ships can skip all of South America if they're going from New York to California. So instead of going all the way around, now they can just go right through the canal, right through this man-made river. You can think of a canal as a man-made river. So sometimes the press had a field day with this, and a lot of people put out political cartoons. So here you see Teddy Roosevelt actually by himself digging the canal, and you can see the ships sort of lining up to get through the canal to go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean without having to go all the way around South America. So in addition to his corollary, which was an imperialist policy that led to the Panama Canal, Teddy Roosevelt's also known as a conservationist, and for his belief in conservationism. Conservationism you can think of as environmentalism, and a lot of this came from the fact that Teddy Roosevelt was a passionate hunter, and you'll notice the picture on the side that is Teddy Roosevelt, and yes, that is a giant elephant that he killed with his bare hands. No, with the gun that he's holding in the picture. And so conservationism is like environmentalism today, but it's a little bit different. Teddy Roosevelt believed that we should use resources because we're industrializing and industry is making all these important goods, but we shouldn't waste resources. He was in favor of using resources and gaining resources, but he wasn't in favor of wasting. So One of the effects of his conservationism was the creation of 5 national parks. He was a big supporter of the national park movement and really made environmentalism an issue in the 1900s, where before that people just kind of thought, oh, there's like an infinite amount of resources. We can just keep using and polluting and there won't be an impact. And Teddy Roosevelt actually said, no, we shouldn't waste. There is an impact. So very important and definitely a big feature of his presidency and one of his legacies. So the last piece that you need to know about Teddy Roosevelt is the Russo-Japanese War. Russo is short for Russian, and so this war was Russia versus Japan. It was 2 rival imperial ambitions, so both Japan and Russia wanted to have influence in Asia. They wanted to get raw materials for their industries. They wanted to build their imperial prestige, show that they were sort of big, strong countries. And they fought a war, and if you look at the picture, it kind of almost looks like a picture from World War I, and the technology was very similar, and so this was kind of like a precursor to World War I in some ways. But everybody thought that Russia was going to win this war, because think about it. At this time, people are racist. They think that, some people are racist. They think that white people are superior, and so they automatically assume that a European country like Russia could not lose to an Asian country like Japan. Japan surprised everybody and beat Russia. Everybody was like, what? How did Japan beat Russia? That's crazy. And sort of with that win, with that victory, Japan enters the world stage and becomes the empire that we think of today, especially when we think of World War II. So this was a big point for Japan. This surprised everybody. This is just one of the turning points for Russia and Tsarist Russia as well. This is sort of shows how sick Russia is and how weak they are and how strong Japan is. So at the end of the war, let me go back. At the end of the war, Teddy Roosevelt, the reason that this relates to Teddy Roosevelt, right? Like, what does this war have to do with Teddy Roosevelt? At the end of the war, Roosevelt brokered the peace between Russia and Japan. He brought the 2 countries together and said, all right, Japan won. Let's make a treaty to stop the fighting. It's got to end. And he actually got a Nobel Prize for that, like I said, and the treaty was called the Portsmouth Treaty. So let's just quickly review. Real quick, Teddy Roosevelt, he's one of the great presidents. He's on the Mount Rushmore Memorial right in between Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln. So he's definitely considered one of the great presidents. He's known for trust busting, which is breaking up monopolies that control competition, or big trusts. Remember the video game analogy. He's also known for the Roosevelt corollary, or this addition to our foreign policy, where we're going to start carrying a big stick. We're going to use the military to influence the Western Hemisphere. He's known for his environmentalism. He loved long walks on the beach, loved nature, loved hunting. In fact, on his post-presidential hunting trip to Africa, I believe he killed over 11,000 species. Very interesting. And last, he's also known as peacemaker, and he made peace between Russia and Japan, got the Nobel Peace Prize for it. And if you remember these 4 things, trust busting, Roosevelt corollary, conservationism, and the Russo-Japanese War peace, you will be in good shape for the couple of questions that come up about Theodore Roosevelt. Good luck and keep studying.